Welcome to Kernels of Truth, brought to you by Progress Kentucky. Thank you so much for joining us. It's another show. I'm very excited to be with you. We've had an interesting week of Kentucky political news that we're going to get to just in a minute. We're going to cover the new report about Kentucky GOP limiting public information about the cost of bills they're advancing, some work they're doing to further cut the amount of revenue the state takes in, primarily from the wealthy, and a reminder about the cost of Amendment 2, the voucher vote that we'll be confronted with on November 5th. Then we'll have an interview with Shaela Worsley, the youngest Kentucky delegate who represented our fair Commonwealth at last week's DNC. Finally, we're going to close with a November call to do something. So, but before we get into it, are you ready to help turn Kentucky purple? We're glad you're here. We know there are literally billions of websites you could be looking at right now. You probably have about 500,000 tabs open, but we're glad you're here, and we hope you agree with us that Kentucky deserves better than Mitch McConnell, Rand Paul, Jamie Comer, big banks, Andy Barr, and the GOP supermajorities in the General Assembly, which block our governor time and time again from moving Kentucky forward. Despite the challenges facing our state, we've had some pretty significant highlights. If you recall, we rejected Amendment 2, classic Amendment 2, to keep abortion protections in our state constitution. We reelected Andy, making abortion front and center in that vote. So we can absolutely get things done in the state, but it's clear that there's lots to do to win better electoral outcomes in our Commonwealth, unless you want your tax dollars siphoned away from public schools and sent to unaccountable religious schools, or just kicked back to rich folks. But between now and this November, 69 days from today, we are going to be working for better electoral outcomes in Kentucky. We hope you'll support Progress Kentucky in our campaign for a more compassionate Commonwealth. Please make a contribution right now via our secure online website. Act Blue to help turn Kentucky purple. $5, $50, $500. It all adds up. So that's it. That's the pitch. I think you should do it. I think you should go ahead and head to that secure Act Blue website. I know if you're anything like me, you've gotten maybe 15,000 texts from politicians asking for your dollars. Why should you give the money to us instead of a politician? I don't know. I guess it's because we're thinking about long-term power for Kentucky. We aren't just about one election. We're about the long haul. And as we all know, Georgia wasn't Georgia until it was Georgia, and now it is absolutely purple, and it matters deeply for our nation's election. Kentucky, we are probably not going to notice that there's a nationwide election happening because no one's going to talk to Kentucky voters about the top of the ticket, right? It's up to us to talk to folks about Amendment 2, about the other folks who are on the ballot. And for us to do that, we need some resources. So we think we do a decent job with this show. We'll see. I'm trying to actually produce and host tonight. So that's always a ride. But, I think what we do here is matters, and it's useful. And if you agree, kick us $50. It'll help us get this show out wider. It'll help us do our direct voter contact work to turn out the folks who don't normally turn out in elections, and can help push back on Amendment 2 and make sure that our tax dollars, our public dollars, go to public schools, period. So that's a little bit of a longer intro. So a little more like, what I'm feeling right now tonight, and why we do this work. It's to make a difference so we can all have a better Commonwealth. So I hope you'll kick in and help out. And if you're wondering who is this person and why are they on a soapbox so early in the evening, let me tell you, I'm Aaron. I'm coming to you from Chilesburg, which is a lovely deed restricted community. It reminds me every time I drive into the neighborhood that it is deed restricted. It doesn't really define exactly what deeds and what restrictions. I'll tell you one restriction that Chilesburg, the neighborhood, has. I cannot put up a political sign until 30 days before the election. Or the HOA will send you a nasty gram. So that's one deed restriction that we have in Chilesburg. But if I was going to put up a sign in my yard, it would have said, "Welcome back, JD. No one missed you." So that's a teaser for a story we'll cover. And now this is a very exciting time in the show because we're turning to a brand new co-host. And we're going to hear who she is, where she is, how she ended up on this live stream, and what does her protest sign say today. You there, MICHE? Are you there?
I'm here. Hi, Aaron.
Awesome. Hey, it's so nice to see you. Thanks so much for joining me.
It's nice to be here. I'm excited. So my name's MICHE BRANSCUM. I'm coming to you from Frankfurt. I'm just down the street from the Capitol. An exciting place. And I ended up here because I'm actually a former candidate for state representative. And I started that journey as a mom. My son has been trying to get a simple little bill passed for about 6 years. He's 11 now. He was actually a guest on the show a few years back. And watching how the legislature reacted to my son was an eye opener. And the fact that a lot of the things that I believe my whole life may or may not be true. So I wanted to give just the average Kentuckian a voice. And my candidacy ended in the primary, which is okay because I like being an activist, and that's why I'm here today. And my protest is actually in solidarity with our union brothers and sisters in Louisville. We currently have not one, not two, but 3 unions protesting in Louisville. There's the 32BJ Service Employees International, and they are protesting safety conditions at Monument Chemical. We have the Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, 830. They're protesting the BAE systems over pay concerns, and Communication Workers of America, Local 3310. And they're protesting AT&T's unfair labor practices. So hold the line, guys.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. She also joined the board of Progress Kentucky. We're really excited to have her leadership there as well. In case you guys don't know, I think I say it every episode, but we're a nonprofit organization that also does a podcast. Really excited to have her enthusiasm and energy and ideas and information. So I immediately tapped her and said, hey, I think you should come on this show on a frequent basis. So glad you could join me to save y'all from just hearing me, which no one wants that. All right, so let's get into news of the week. We got some cool stories that we're going to cover. Very excited about, letting you know what's happened here in Kentucky, in the political landscape. The first story I think we're going to cover is about how the Kentucky GOP are not actually fiscally conservative, right? So there's definitely this overall idea that the Kentucky, the GOP is the party of fiscal responsibility, right? Which I just think is it's wonderful branding. It is fantastic branding. I think it does not hold up to scrutiny. And this is a story that comes to us from the Louisville Public Media about how more and more bills are being passed without their fiscal note being shared publicly. Okay, so fiscal note, these are statements that the analysis that are prepared by the nonpartisan staff of the Legislative Research Commission, or the LRC, and the administrative arm of the Kentucky General Assembly. The notes estimate how a bill will affect state government revenues and expenditures. They're not required under Kentucky law or the rules of either chamber for a bill to advance, let alone required to be made public even when they've been requested and produced, which is, I think, insane that there would be nonpartisan information about what the legislature is up to in terms of our tax income or outcome expenditures, and that would be knowable, it would be known, and then it could be marked confidential, right? So an example of a bill that passed recently into law with a hidden confidential fiscal note is one of the most impactful bills of the past decade in Kentucky, House Bill 8 from 2022, which is actually the bill that set up a process to incrementally cut the state's income tax until it is eliminated, right? This is we want to be like Tennessee bill, but we don't have Nashville, so or Gatlinburg. So HB8, what's that?
Or Memphis.
Or Memphis, or many other things. Yeah. So when HB8 was before the House Budget Committee, there was a fiscal note posted online for an outdated version of the bill, but not the significantly amended version they were voting on. So former Democratic Rep. Angie Hatton, who was a rock star, and very sad to lose her in the General Assembly. She's from Whitesburg. She called for a motion to delay a vote on HB8 until the fiscal note could be updated, for the committee substitute. But pursuant to chamber rules, they wanted that to be added to the record. Her motion was quickly defeated by a voice vote in that GOP-dominated committee, and then followed by the passage of the bill. So House Bill 8 would pass into law later that month, but the LRC never published the confidential fiscal note that was completed for the final version of the bill that same day, which detailed an estimated loss of $888 million of state revenue just over the first 2 years of that bill. So significant amount. So in this, the fact that the legislature was voting on that without like making that public, is just outrageous. And gives me one more example of just how they are not the party of fiscal responsibility. And the lack of requirement for public fiscal notes makes the Kentucky General Assembly an outlier among other state legislatures. There was a 2015 study by the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and that think tank found Kentucky was one of just 12 states to not require fiscal notes for nearly all bills with a significant fiscal impact. A decade after that study, Kentucky's even more of an outlier, and all of our neighboring states continue to require the posting of these fiscal notes, either for a filed bill like Indiana or for any bill to clear a committee or a chamber like Ohio, with the exception of Illinois. So of the 212 bills passed into law in 2024, less than 10% had a public fiscal note at any point, and only 3 had a public fiscal note for its final version. So that's irresponsible. At best, that's irresponsible. I would say it's negligent because that information is knowable. It can be created if they just take their time on the legislative process. They can make sure that the LRC has that information available for not just the members who are voting on it, but the constituents who these lawmakers are supposed to be representing. I don't know, MICHE, any thoughts about that one?
Well, I mean, this is why we have the legislative process. We want these bills, we want these things out there so that people can be aware of them and make their case for whether they support the bill or not. And this is actually one of the things and one of the reasons I ran myself, because this is not acceptable. I feel like our legislators have forgotten who they work for. They work for us. So we need that information. It needs to be released publicly so that we have it, so we can tell them how to represent us. So
yeah, for sure. 100% sure. All right. So let's see. I see our guest in the chat. She says she has not been sent the link. I emailed the link to her. So let me go ahead and we're going to tee up the next story.
Okay.
This is, very much related, right? Same like narrative here about fiscal responsibility. And this is how, the bill we just were discussing, the great example about these confidential fiscal notes and the cost of these bills. So HB 8, was the bill that, basically set the process so that the state of Kentucky would reduce its income tax to zero. That is one that, there was news made this week because the Kentucky Senate Appropriations and Revenue Committee Chair, Chris McDaniel, told the public that they have, been working diligently to hit the fiscal triggers to lower the income tax, and they are confident they are. So the state budget director told lawmakers on Wednesday that those thresholds that were established by the legislature, the GOP-dominated legislature, have been met at the end of this fiscal year. So that means that, the state's income tax would be going another, half percentage point decrease to 3.5% during the 2025 legislative session. And then that would go into effect at the start of 2026. A lot of folks have pushed against these efforts because, pushing our state income tax to zero means it will, this is a bill that basically lights a fuse to a bomb in our tax income, tax revenues, which of course then means that, we don't have the resources to spend for critical programs, right? So, this is very much that we want to shrink government down to the size that we can drown it in a bathtub kind of approach to quote unquote governance. And I know this is something you thought a lot about, MICHE. What's your kind of considerations about this bill and about this move?
Well, as you mentioned, the state's gearing up to cut its income tax rate from 4% down to 3.5% starting in 2026. So that sounds great if you like the idea of paying less tax, right? Let's be real. Nobody wants to pay more. But the fact of the matter is, Kentucky's lawmakers got to this decision in a pretty controversial way. As you mentioned, they had a formula set in place, rules that they needed to have a big cushion in the state's rainy day fund, and that they couldn't spend more than they brought in by at least $1.3 billion. Now, the problem, we didn't hit those targets naturally. Instead, they kind of moved the goalposts. They transferred a bunch of money into a reserve fund and then used that fund for over 265 different projects without counting it against their spending. It's like they found and created their own loophole to make it look like they met the conditions for a tax cut when they really didn't. And now There's a potential 5.2% revenue drop forecasted for the next year, and things are looking a little shaky. That could mean a shortfall of, like you mentioned, $800 million. So when revenues drop and you've already promised a tax cut, the money's got to come from somewhere. And that often ends up coming out of essential services like schools, healthcare, infrastructure. And remember, we're talking about the amendment to further impact school funding. So this could be a pretty big problem. And that's where, people are referencing the Kansas experiment. Back in 2012, Kansas tried something very similar. They went all in on deep tax cuts with the idea that that would kickstart the economy. They slashed income tax rates and completely got rid of state income taxes for many businesses. The plan was that all of this would lead to a booming economy with lots of new jobs and eventually more tax revenue coming in, even with lower rates. But here's what actually happened. Instead of getting more money, Kansas ended up with a massive budget crisis. Revenues tanked, the state couldn't pay for basic things like schools and roads, and they had to make deep budget cuts just to stay afloat. It got so bad that even the lawmakers who originally pushed for the tax cuts had to backtrack. In 2017, they repealed many of these cuts, admitting the whole thing had been a horrible mistake. So what's the lesson for Kentucky? The promised return on revenue from deep tax cuts, frankly, just isn't a sure thing. That sounds great in theory, cut taxes, boost the economy, more businesses will move in, we'll end up with more money in the end. But in reality, things usually don't go that way. If the growth doesn't show up, if it's slower than expected, if we have a disaster, then we're left with lots of less money, and we have to make some really tough choices. Like, do we want to cut funding for schools and healthcare? Do we need to raise taxes or fees to make up for lost revenue? Do we need to look at taxing food, medicine? Or do we just borrow money and deal with the consequences down the road? Kentucky seems to be betting that the cuts will pay off, but they're doing it at a time when we're already seeing signs of revenue decline. It's really risky because if that growth doesn't happen, we're going to be facing some pretty serious financial problems down the road. And just like in Kansas, the cuts can end up doing more harm than good, especially if they primarily benefit the wealthy, while middle and lower income families only see a tiny portion of a difference in their weekly paychecks. So here we are. Kentucky's going to move ahead with these tax cuts, even though we didn't really meet the benchmarks, but with a lot of question marks about what comes next. And as we've seen with the Kansas experiment, there are definitely reasons to be cautious. Cutting taxes is the easy part. Dealing with the fallout if it doesn't go as planned, well, that's the hard part. So what do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, thank you for that, analysis and that example for sure. Like, it's gambling, right? but it's not their money. They're gambling with house money, and the impacts aren't going to be impacts they pay because, by and large, they're all like, they're not folks who need public support or public services, right? And they're never going to cut their legislator pay. They're not going to cut their per diems, right? That's never going to happen, right? No matter how, how much of a decrease they see in revenue, right? So right. Yeah, it's garbage. It's outrageous. It's offensive, but I'm sure it'll be popular, right? Like who wants to be taxed until it all falls apart, right? And then somebody needs to fix it. And I'm sure that'll be the time the Democrats get back in power. And it'll be like, all the hard decisions, all the tough things, like all the pain. Like, yeah, that's what the Democratic Party is for, is like doing the responsible thing. The Republicans are like, we're just going to keep having a big party until, the beer runs out, and then we'll see what happens.
Well, and I am, I come from a family of state workers. I was a state worker myself. And one thing that I know in Kansas was particularly hit hard was the retirement fund. And, we kind of have a history of tapping into that whenever we need to. So that's another concern. So. Yeah, no, that's a whole other issue. The Kentucky
whole other issue, which I think we have covered in this past. Doug was a retired state employee, so he kept an eye on some of those things and from time to time. But yeah, really, I think that Kansas point is one that Doug had made before, but a really, really important one to keep in our mind, as this is seems to be like a freight train moving forward, right? Because they're going to do whatever they need to do to like meet those thresholds, where hook or by crook, I guess. All right, so
average, if memory serves, and I haven't brushed up on these exact percentage, but you can expect about a 30% return on tax cuts like this. So where's the other 70% going to come from?
hey, that's a tough question, Shay, and I don't know that they want to answer those. They passed it without a fiscal note, without a public fiscal note. They clearly didn't really care what the actual math told them. All right, we're gonna do one more story on this kind of this story, this theme, this narrative about how irresponsible the Kentucky legislature is with our tax dollars. This is one that they were really irresponsible with it, but the state Supreme Court wouldn't let them be that irresponsible. So now it comes to us as voters to make the decision about whether we want to be responsible or irresponsible with tax dollars. And this is in terms of public school. This is, of course, Amendment 2. And this is a bit of a throwback. A couple months ago, Kentucky Center for Economic Policy issued this really, really great report that looked at the impact of diverting public money to private school vouchers in Kentucky. So really always appreciate the work that the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy does to help inform the conversations about policy. And so we rely heavily on them. But what they're just a little reminder, for Kentucky establishing a program proportional to what Florida, the largest state program, has in place would cost $1.19 billion annually from the Kentucky state budget. So that's the cost of employing about 10,000 Kentucky public school teachers and employees. Even a much smaller initial voucher program, like 1/6 the proportional size of Florida, smaller than the rapidly growing programs in Arizona, Indiana, Iowa, North Carolina, Ohio, and Wisconsin. Yep, these Republican legislators would really like to pass these voucher bills. That would cost Kentucky's budget $199 million, about the cost of 1,645 public school personnel. And these other states show that those programs start small and explode quickly. And they also show that the vast majority of people who utilize the program, 65 to 90% of the voucher costs, go to subsidized families already sending their kids to private schools, or the folks who are planning to do so anyway. So this is the group whose average household income in Kentucky is about 54% higher than public school families. And providing vouchers to that group will easily cost the state hundreds of millions of dollars based on the number of Kentucky students already in private schools. And the cost of paying for those vouchers will directly hit the state's poorest rural areas the hardest because of low property wealth, which makes them more dependent on state dollars for public education. Those districts almost entirely lack private schools, so vouchers are unlikely to be, make setting up new private schools financially viable in most communities. The result will be tax dollars leaving those rural districts entirely, with local residents, state taxes paying for private education elsewhere. And of course, many of these rural counties, the school system is the largest employer. So, a real problem in terms of just jobs in some of those communities as well. So, yeah, really appreciate the hard work of the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy to do the math and show us what matters. But again, Kentucky legislature really wanted to pass this. They passed this. The state Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that because the state constitution is very clear. And so now they're putting this on the ballot in November, and it's up to us, the voters, to reject this bad idea for sure. MICHE, what do you think about the voucher bill?
Well, I grew up in southeastern Kentucky, so I grew up in one of those rural areas you're talking about. And like you mentioned, no one's going to be building a charter school in, Harlan. They're just not. So this already, I've worked in a public school. I don't know if you know that or not, but I know how hard teachers work. I know how you want to talk about people who can stretch a dollar. Our teachers can do it. But the fact is, they're already doing so much with so little. We don't need to do anything that's going to impact them further. So I oppose it, obviously, and I'm hoping others do. And this is kind of an interesting little tidbit. As you know, my son and I, we've started an advocacy group to teach kids about civics, and we have a lot of homeschoolers in that program. And this is actually an issue, believe it or not, that's kind of uniting both sides, because the homeschoolers don't like it because with it comes the government oversight. Right. So this is kind of one of those issues that you wouldn't think would be reaching across that divide, but it is.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I was kind of surprised too. But yeah, a lot, makes sense. If the government's giving you money, they're going to. Yeah. So I know, right? But
Absolutely. They're going to have some requirements. I think most folks are like, probably not enough, but, some measure of accountability to show where that money's going, I would hope.
so
But
it is. I was surprised it's crossing that divide. So, but I'm really hoping we defeat it. Like you said, it's been defeated once. I think we can do it again.
I'm not going to count on the voters having the
Right.
wisdom
No,
of the
we've got
state
to
Supreme Court, but
mobilize.
I think it's a bad idea, and I think most people they think about it a little bit, like, oh yeah, that's dumb. We shouldn't
Right.
be paying for that, especially when people are like, oh yeah, these people that would have sent their kids to private school anyway. Like, why are we giving them money for that then? Like, if you want to do that, cool. No one's stopping you, right? No one's
Right.
stopping you from homeschooling. No one's stopping you from sending your kids to private school. But that doesn't mean that we should be paying for two educational systems.
And most private schools have, tuition assistance or scholarships. So the people who need it can get it, or I hope so. But it's been my experience from what I've seen.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so we got one more story before we head to our guest, Shaela Worsley, who has said, we see her now. Well, I see that her icon. I see her name, so I don't know if she can turn on her camera so I can see. Oh, look, there she is. Okay, so we're one story, and then we'll go to Shaela. I'm very excited about that conversation, so hold tight. But we had one thing that we really felt like wanted to touch on quickly, and that is, who was in town earlier this week. And it was our friend and yours, J.D. Vance, the guy who called Kentuckians lazy, Jackson, Kentucky, where his roots are. I thought, these are folks that really should be pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, and it's all their fault that they aren't, which, of course, his kind of bio is what put him on the ticket largely, because they thought he would have that kind of working class appeal, because everyone loves, an Ivy League hedge fund manager, right? Who's a weirdo who doesn't know how to order donuts. So JD Vance was here. It was an event, of course, that the Crafts hosted. Ambassador Kelly and coal magnate Joe Kraft were the top line hosts, along with our friends Andy Barr, also Hal Rogers. Congressman Hal Rogers came out from the Hollards to come and join the event. And reading the article, the press release, the article in the Herald Leader, it looks like they made about $2 million for Trump's and JD Vance's election campaign, and had a whole set of folks there talking about how great Trump will be, and that they criticized Kamala Harris. The thing that I thought was interesting is that they didn't actually mention, apparently, in this kind of 20-minute stump speech that Vance gave. The only two people that spoke were Joe Kraft, and he did like a quick 5-minute intro, and then JD Vance spoke for about 20 minutes, and did not reportedly mention the governor at all, Andy Beshear. So that's shocking to me that he didn't. JD Vance wasn't like personally affronted enough by the he ain't from here hashtag that Governor Beshear launched, or really any of the digs that he's been giving to JD Vance to actually mention it. I would have imagined if I was JD Vance, heaven forbid, and after Governor Beshear came after me pretty hard, and then didn't win the Veep stakes, I would there are things you could say because of that scenario that I think would have probably gone over pretty well with the audience of like diehard Republican,
right,
rich, fat cats. But he didn't go there at all. He stuck to the stump speech. Apparently doesn't have the realization that, that would have actually made his time with people more enjoyable and more lighthearted and more, useful, because I don't think he's got those kind of instincts. But I don't know.
Aaron, he maybe only has one stump speech memorized.
Perhaps that's it. And, you can't give that same stump speech when you go to Georgia or when you go to, Michigan or whatever, because then you got to talk about a different governor that, Trump hates.
Right.
It's a good point. Obviously, I just want to let everyone know I was at a fundraiser on Monday night, Tuesday night, whatever that was, the same night though, but it was for our friends Adam Moore and Sherilyn Stevenson and the Bluegrass Activist Alliance. Put that one together, and it did not cost me $10,000 for a photo op. You know, I got a hug and a high five for nothing. They assumed that I paid when I walked in. I did, just to be clear, I did, but it was not a $10,000 selfie, that's for sure. But yeah, and then you noted that there was some other like kind of fundraiser or event that happened with a a high profile person happening.
Yes, let's talk about Dolly. I would much rather talk about Dolly Parton.
Yeah,
so she was in town for the Imagination Library, and weren't there some problems with our legislature with Dolly a year or so back?
Oh, really? I don't remember that.
I remember
I
it
would
was
have
one of those
I
like
would have
little
put
brief
that out of my
things.
head.
I will have to look it up, but I really think there
Oh
was.
my God, what a teaser. It's like a cliffhanger,
I
Misha.
know, I'm
Like,
gonna have to look it up.
you're
But,
gonna have to look it up and
I
put it in
think
the
there
chat.
was. Maybe I'm wrong, but
Who doesn't like Dolly Parton?
I know we all love Dolly. Dolly's amazing. But yes, she was in town. She met with the governor and our first lady. So let's talk about that. Let's focus.
That's the event I would want to be at.
Me
For
too.
sure. Not hanging out with the Crafts and JD Vance. That's one you could not pay me to go to. But I would absolutely. I mean, I don't think I could spend $10,000 to go hang out with Dolly, because there'd be questions. I mean, in the heat of the moment, I could see myself writing that check, but that would be a problem when it was cash. There'd be a lot of real significant questions, like why didn't I bring my wife or whatever? I don't know. So yeah, we love Dolly. We're fans of Dollywood. If you like roller coasters and you like good quality music and entertainment, check out Dollywood if you've not been. I would the idea of JD Vance creating a theme park to create jobs for Jackson, Kentucky. I don't see it. I don't see it happening. In fact, I don't think they created any jobs in Jackson, Kentucky. Just sold a few books to take advantage of his roots, I guess.
Right. Where he grew up in Middleton, Ohio.
Right, where he actually grew up. All right, so we are now going to head to the guest. Very exciting to have with us tonight, Shaela Worsley, I've got a little bit of a bio here for you. She's a 23-year-old advocate for change and a proud graduate of Morehead State University, currently pursuing a master's degree in public policy. She's been actively involved in political campaigns since the age of 17. And with experience working on multiple political campaigns, she's dedicated to inspiring the next generation to engage more deeply in the democratic process. Her passion for public service and commitment to making a difference drives her continued efforts to bring about meaningful change. So that is awesome. I love that bio. I'm inspired by it. Shaela, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me?
We're having a little bit of connectivity issues, but we will make it work. So yeah, tell us a little bit about, what was the experience like? How did you like the DNC? I watched a bunch of it. I couldn't watch all of it because good God, people, that's a lot of speeches. But I watched some. What did you like the best? And how was the overall event?
Ooh, honestly, it was like a pinch me moment the moment I got there. I've gotten stopped several times because everywhere I went, I just had the biggest smile on my face. And they were like, you look very excited to be here. A lot of young people don't look this excited to be involved in politics. And I was just excited that I got the chance to experience history. I was the youngest woman delegate coming out of Kentucky there, 23 years old. It was inspiring. I had to give it one word, I would say it was inspiring. Honestly, to start off with how I decided to become a delegate, honestly, I got on my computer one day and I've heard my dad talk about it several times about being at the DNC, what it's like being there at the DNC and having a seat at the table and watching history happen. So I decided one day that I got on my laptop and I was like, you know what? I'm going to just go for it. I'm going to try. I do doubt myself a lot, so I was like, it probably won't happen, but I'm going to try it anyway. So I got on there, signed up to run as a delegate, and a state convention came around. And I remember this feeling like it was yesterday. I was shaking in my boots the entire day. Part of me thinking like, there's no way this will happen. And then the other half, like, you got it, girl. Like you've worked your whole life for this. You got this. And the moment I got up to give my speech, to hopefully be given a chance to attend such a monumental moment in history, I never took for granted. Um, and then from there, when they announced my name that I would be attending the DNC as a delegate, I remember just shooting out of my chair and just jumping for joy. You wouldn't see anybody as excited for politics as me that day, I don't think. Um, but being at the DNC was such an honor and a privilege, and it's a week that I will never forget or take for granted.
That's awesome. And who's your favorite speaker that you saw?
Oof.
That's tough. There's a lot of them.
I would have to say Michelle Obama. Only because she reminded me of, it's like a speech that my mom would give to me, like, you don't like something, get up and do something. That's pretty much what she told us to do. So it was kind of her hope is making a comeback speech. She told us just don't sit around. You want something to change, you have to be the change. I felt like she was talking directly to me, even though there were thousands and thousands of people in the room. I feel like she was singling me out and telling me, "Hey, you want freedom, you got to fight for it. It don't come for free." And so she was definitely my favorite speaker of the week, along with Jasmine Crockett. I look up to her so much. Her speech was so powerful while also putting the other party in their place, which is needed. But I would definitely say Michelle Obama. She really was the one that pushed me to go home and mobilize and tell my friends and um, tell the people in my community why this election is so important.
That's awesome. That's so great. Misha, do you have a question?
Yeah. So, how did it feel to be a part of such an event that had such significant attention on Kentucky? Because we did have a governor who was a finalist in the Veep Stakes, and also Hadley Duvall. She's a feature for abortion rights. So, what was it like? Not to mention just the fact that this is such a historic occasion with the whole ticket. What was that like?
I will say I shed lots of tears that week. Watching Hadley give such an amazing, powerful, and brave story. I remember when they told us at the delegation breakfast when she was going to speak that evening at the DNC, how excited I was for her. I made sure to pray for her, wish her the best luck. But to see Kentucky on the stage the first night of the DNC, was both honoring and I was so proud to be a Kentuckian that whole week. But specifically seeing Annie Bashir hit that stage and Hadley hit that stage, it made me even more proud that day. Experiencing that moment as a Kentuckian, a young Kentuckian, it was, like I said, an honor and a privilege. Also, I was able to witness that moment in history when Vice President Kamala Harris accepted her nomination as the first woman of color to accept the nomination as our presidential candidate. I got to witness that moment with my father, who was the first black Kentucky chairman of Kentucky. So it kind of hit me in. It tugged at my heartstrings. I will say that. I never thought I would see the day. I'm not saying that it was impossible, but it kind of gave me that will and that power to, like, you can do this too, right? And seeing it happen right in front of my eyes really gave me that wake up call that's like, hey, like, if she can do it, you can too. She's letting you know. She's opening that door. She's busting open that glass ceiling for you to come behind her. And I will do the same for the younger generation coming behind me. But I was one of the proudest Kentuckians seeing our home on that stage Monday night.
I know. And
sorry. Go ahead, Misha. Sorry. No, go.
It's wonderful as well because, as you mentioned earlier, Aaron, Kentucky, most of the time, we're sort of overlooked whenever it comes to the national stage. So here we were, front and center.
Oh, for sure. Thing that was was very exciting was where Kentucky specifically was sitting. I feel like we were overlooked. Um, we were honestly, we were given a seat at the table. All of us were given a seat at the table. Like even just where we were able to experience the historic moments of the DNC, we had probably one of the best seats in the House. So
Nice.
I'm proud of where Andy has led Kentucky, and I'm excited to see where the future of Kentucky will go.
Yeah, I got to imagine if Dan Cameron was the governor of Kentucky, our seats at the DNC would not have been as good. I really got to imagine that's if the only like national stage Democrat we have would be Morgan, and I adore Morgan. He's been on the show. We want to get him back, but Andy carried a lot of attention and a lot of great positive energy towards Kentucky, and he's been such a great kind of spokesperson for Kentucky, and he's like just told our story so well, and the great economic activity that's happening here, all the great stories. So glad to see that you were able to be a part of that. But one question I've got for you: so you decided to go to the convention, and it was the Joe Biden convention, right? So you were okay. You were like, yeah, I gotta go see that old white guy lose his train of thought, and I got to imagine that there was some excitement when you realized what was happening, but you were okay. You're like, yeah, I want to see Joe Biden make history as the oldest human ever to be nominated for president.
Well, I mean, I was my joy when he passed the baton for Kamala Harris, so I would say was unmatched. But I was honestly just as excited to make that way for Joe Biden as well. Anything to keep the the other one off the ticket. Um, and when Joe Biden came to speak that night, I was on my toes, screaming and hollering. I'm pretty sure I lost my voice that night too. But I was just as excited for her as I was him. And really, initially, I signed up to be a delegate to support the Biden Harris ticket. So.
Yeah, that's probably why you got on. There weren't nearly so many people that were like clamoring for that opportunity. Like, oh my gosh, this guy. I'm going to vote for him, but you want me to like spend my money to travel to Chicago for a week? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be mean to the man. I'm just, I'm like many. I feel a lot more hope, a lot more enthusiasm about our current nominees and ticket. So, would you say, are you reflective of the youth of today? I mean, are you like your enthusiasm for a democratic process and democratic politics, right? Not just democracy small d, but Democrats capital D. Would you say are there a lot of folks like you in the kind of the youth of today? Do you have friends that are similarly enthusiastic, or are you kind of a freak?
Look,
you can be honest. No one's watching.
My friends call me if they going down in politics. They're like, "Hey, is this true? Like, hey, is this true?" So I try to spread my knowledge through my friends. I know that week of convention, I made sure to on all of my social medias, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, you name it. I was going live, I was making updates, I was posting pictures, I was dropping tools on how you can get involved in this election. But my message to young people, there aren't a lot of young people like me. There was another delegate who was 18. He was the youngest male delegate there with Kentucky, and I would say if not as excited as I was, he was probably 10 times more of a freak. Young people, we have to get involved in this democratic process because we are the architects of the future. I believe that our active participation ensures that the issues we care about, like climate change, affordable education, social justice, are prioritized by those in power. Engaging in democracy builds habits of civic responsibility, ensuring that today's youth will continue to contribute to society in years to come. Our voices add to the diversity of opinions needed for a healthy, functioning democracy with long-term impacts of today's decisions on the line. We have a unique opportunity to shape policies that will, excuse me, affect not just us but the generation to come. And by voting, advocating, mobilizing, and participating in civic activities, young people can help create a future that reflects our values and aspirations. In the words of Michelle Obama, do something. So that's what to do. I'm starting. I will be setting up voter registration tables starting on college campuses. Of course, starting with my alma mater, Morehead State University, and I'll move on from there to try to get as many people registered to vote as possible.
That's awesome. And you can do that up until the month before the election. You can register. And of course, if you're going to be 18 on or before November 5th, you can register whenever, but you can vote in that election, even if you aren't 18 now, right? So
You have until October 7th at 4:00 p.m. So.
Nice. Yeah, and kudos to the current leadership there at the Secretary of State's office. It's a good website. Like it's a really easy website to do it online for sure. All right, MICHE, any final questions for Shaela?
Well, I just want to say I'm really inspired by you. I think it's amazing. I don't know if you know the history of my son, but I have an 11-year-old who's very politically active as well. And I firmly believe that our young people are going to change the course of our country, and just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great and you inspire me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I always live by, I keep this quote in the back of my mind, but it's the quote by Martin Luther King Jr. that says that our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. So I've always been told that our generation will inherit a system that will require our experience and our ingenuity to fix. And we've always been told that, oh, we're the leaders of the future, we're the leaders of tomorrow. True, but we're the leaders of right now. So it's
right. And we're rapidly approaching a time when it's the largest voting bloc, the millennials and Gen Z. So
if they show up, if y'all show up, you can be the drivers for sure. It's super exciting. I did not realize this was a Nepo show. So this is a Nepo episode of Kernels of Truth. I did not realize Coleman was your dad. And obviously, MICHE, this is your first time on the show, co-hosting the show. Your son had been on though years before. So the generational Kernels of Truth episode, I did not realize that. Well, that's super cool. And so you're doing voter registration, college campuses, starting at Morehead State, and then kind of spreading wide there. How can people help out? Are there things you want from the general public in terms of awareness or engagement, or like what are the next things you want to tell the public about?
Of course. So right now I'm starting with making posts. That's how word of mouth goes these days. It's Facebook, it's on Twitter, it's X. But right now I'm looking for volunteers so that when I do start to set up these voter registration tables, I don't have to be at every single one of them. I can 5 places at once. So if you would like to help a girl out by setting a voter registration table in your community, in your neighborhood, your local Kroger, whatever, if you're available. I can host a training. I will host a training so you know exactly what to do and how you help. But in order to vote, you have to register. So
for sure. That's awesome. So we will make sure to tag your social handles that you want shared out, put them in the show notes so folks can find them. Whether you're hearing this as a podcast or watching the live stream, it'll be in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for the work you're doing, and so glad that you had a great time at the DNC. I just I was watching it, didn't watch all of it, like I said, too much, but I was so struck by that roll call, right? Because I'd seen a little bit of the RNC, and their roll call was so boring. Like, I just remember that there was that one exciting moment when Mitch got booed by the rest of the delegates. That was pretty awesome. But then the rest of it was like so boring watching paint dry. Like, you guys had a party. That was like, I don't know. That was pretty phenomenal. Do you have a good time with that?
Man, I was not expecting that from George with Lil Jon at staircase. I remember like please put on your wristband. We're like, okay. So we grabbed the wristband from the chair and it just went dark. And I was like, hello? And then all of a sudden, like the lights flash back on, Lil Jon hops up and he starts. Yeah, I was expecting that from like New York maybe or somewhere. Georgia, they came in. It was a party in there.
Absolutely. Seemed like such a good time for sure. All right. Well, thanks again for sharing your experiences with us. Good luck with all the work you're doing. Appreciate your kind of commitment to democracy. And yeah, I hope you get a lot of other young folks getting involved and taking action, because that's absolutely what our future, needs. So, all right.
Thank you.
You cut out a little bit. Sorry.
Oh, we'll get them there. We'll get 'em.
Awesome.
We will see you in the future, I believe.
Yeah. When are you running for office?
Yeah.
Ask me in about well, I turned 24 this October and then I'll be 25 next year. So you might see me in about 2 years.
Yeah.
I'm going to connect with you and talk to you about a merge. Do you know about a merge?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
I was in the 2024 class. We're going to talk.
Oh.
Yeah, that's awesome. Emerge is a great program. We had the executive director on, I don't know, a couple of months ago. Really cool stuff for sure. And yeah, I think that's mostly it. Appreciate your time and get back to doing the fun things that the youth of today do. I don't know what that is, but
I don't know.
See you, Shaela.
Thank you. I have no idea what it is either.
I don't know what my kids are up to. No idea. All right, so we are going to do a final call to action, and then MICHE, maybe you could close out the show if you've got the script in front of you.
And the call to action. So join our election campaign kickoff. We're fighting against Amendment 2 and for more folks in Frankfort to stand against Kentucky's outrageous abortion restrictions and fight for reproductive justice in the General Assembly. Folks like Adam Moore, great guy, to keep Sherilyn Stevenson, another great person. So sign up. We're planning on an election campaign kickoff in September. Stay tuned. You're going to want to be there. And we want to let you know all about it. So head to our homepage at Progress Kentucky, PROGRESSKY.org.
Nice. That is it. Yeah, that's the take action, and I'll go ahead and close this out. So Progress Kentucky is a nonprofit organization. We are registered with the Kentucky Secretary of State. We are organized as a 501c4. We are affiliated with the Indivisible Project, the Commonwealth Alliance for Voter Engagement, or CAVE. We are also proud members of the Forward Kentucky Network. Progress Kentucky's goal is to educate, organize, increase voter turnout, and advance a progressive agenda through civic engagement. Next week's show, we're going to feature another great guest. I think actually the state director of the Humane Society US. So make sure to join us.
Todd.
What's that?
Todd. Yeah, he's been amazing with Ethan. So yeah.
Looking forward to hearing about the Humane Society's work and Todd's work there. So production of episode 175 was by me. Yikes. Nate Orshan wrote and performed our theme song. You can find more information and music at natehosongs.com. If you missed our weekly live stream on Facebook or YouTube, audio podcast and our show notes are available on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you do listen to the pod, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you are listening right now. Logo and some graphic content provided by Couchfire Media.
Aaron, I just totally forgot something. I gave you that spoiler about the Dolly Parton controversy within the Kentucky State Legislature. And it was in 2022. There was a representative or a senator, I think his name was Meredith, who said that he thought some of the material for the Imagination Library was too controversial and not age appropriate. So
totally
I remembered it.
That totally checks out. What a bunch of jerks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for tracking that down. All right, that's why you listen to all the way to the end, folks, because you get the like little wrap up information. All right, everyone have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Okay.